Hi, and welcome to the I Teed Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 98. What can Tom Symkowski teach us about email security? So, Tom Symkowski, he works at Initech. He takes the specs from the customer and delivers them to the engineer. Sometimes he does that himself. Sometimes his secretary brings the specs from the customers to the engineers. Sometimes they're faxed. Tom has people skills. Sometimes Tom has a good idea. Tom has a wonderful idea of a mat that's called Jump to Conclusions. It has a bunch of conclusions that you could jump to it. That's his $1 million idea, like the pet rock. If you didn't know, if you aren't gathering on, Tom Symkowski is one of the characters from the movie Office Space. Office Space being a movie specifically about the terrors and horrific situation of an office life and corporate culture, and generally just how shitty it is to work in a place that continually sucks the life out of you because that's just devoid of any joy or anything like that. And so you go crazy, create a podcast, and steal a bunch of money. Totally not relatable in any way or shape or form to anybody, I'm sure. Anyway, whole point is that Tom is an intermediary in Initech. He takes the specs from the customer for transaction purposes or for design purposes and delivers it to the actual software engineers who then write the code for the customer's designs. Now, all of that means that Tom's job can be fairly important. You know, he can control the flow of communication. He can identify any issues that there might be with the specs or identity with the customer data. And he keeps the engineers focused on what they're supposed to. He keeps the engineers focused on writing code or developing or troubleshooting or whatever, instead of having to pay attention to the customer's jargon or random wishes and having to decipher that information down to what can actually be done. So in reality, Tom's job is actually extremely important because that control of information, that flow of information, does make it so that engineers don't have to take time away from their normal job. They don't have to deal with people who they typically don't have a good relationship or ability to do. Tom fosters a relationship. He makes sure that things flow smoothly. He's important to the entire task. And this is where we get into email filtration. Like Tom, email filtration, email security is important. What Microsoft will tell you, if you have a Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Exchange environment, Microsoft will tell you that their Purview platform can handle all communication and security for your email appropriately. And, you know, it might, theoretically, if you pay for everything and if you configure everything right from scratch, and if you know exactly the senders and receivers that you expect, yeah, Microsoft's platform can protect all of that for you. You know, just kind of like an engineer, if they know a customer so intimately that they don't have to talk to them or they don't have to decipher certain things, yeah, that could be the case, but that's not the case. Nobody has the money to spend on all of Microsoft's shit. Sorry, licenses. Nobody has that kind of money. Not even God, because Microsoft charges just a shit ton of money for that. Just a ballpark, if you were to buy every security license that Microsoft offers and not overlap on any particular function, you could well spend $175 per user per month just to get every security aspect of Microsoft, which is what they advise Of course they do, because you're going to spend that much fucking money per month per user. Anyway, the point being is that Microsoft wants to handle all of this communication directly. They want all of that data to go to you directly, which can and cannot be a good thing depending on your configuration and how you want to build your environment, all of that. But from a general perspective, people who are living in reality, one, they can't afford everything that Microsoft's going to give them. Most companies just can't make that jump. There's no fucking way. The other thing is that it doesn't make any sense, because you are allowing direct send from customers, or from outside of the organization to inside your organization. And so I'm going to cover this a little bit more in depth in just a second, but suffice it to say that direct send is a thing that exists in Microsoft, and trusting them to handle it appropriately has disastrous consequences down the line. And we'll cover that in just a second. But what we should discuss is how an actual email should be handled by an organization just in mass. So to avoid certain things like vendor lock-in and things like, single points of failure and all of that, you probably want to have multiple layers in your email filtration, if only just an additional layer above Microsoft. So what you do is you should pay for an email filtration service. And there are a lot out there. A lot of them do a very good job. Some of them are less proactive than others. AI right now in 2025, it's this whole new fucking thing that everybody throws around a buzzword. So everybody's saying that their shit is AI. It's just an algorithm. And so, there's a lot of different companies. You should do research for what's going to work best for your company. And again, I'm not going to throw out any specific vendor. You can find some that are pretty decent out there. Anyway, whole point being is that you should have an additional filter for your email in front of Microsoft. Something that's going to filter your emails to classify spam, phishing, mass marketing emails, things like that will identify those on the front end and allow you to create some sort of documentation, reporting for that influx of emails. You also want to have something that's analyzing emails for malicious links or malicious attachments, sandboxing things. You want to have all of those functionalities inside of your email. You also want to make sure that your email does include the ability to exclude and include for block lists or allow lists. You want to make sure that this information gets created, or that you have the ability to create that. And you also want to make sure that whatever filter you choose has the ability for direct reporting to the user, so that they can see what emails of theirs were blocked, and that they have an option to unblock or allow those emails to flow through in the future. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have an intermediary service that is blocking emails and doesn't tell the user anything at all, because then they might miss an important meeting or an important email and not know it. And have no capacity to respond. So these are all considerations. These are all things you should probably include in an email filter. But when you find and line up an email filtration service or something like that, and you're going to then hook it up to your Microsoft 365 instance, what you need to do, what you should be doing, is one, the documentation from the vendor should tell you how to configure everything. If it doesn't, then you probably have chosen a bad service. But the documentation should tell you that first you need to create a connector. Well, first it should tell you to update your SPF, your DMARC, and your DKIM records. We've covered those in the past, but we'll go over them briefly. SPF is who is allowed to send as me, whereas DKIM is this is how you can identify the emails are sent by me. And DMARC is what do you do in the event that either the server doesn't match or the mark that tells you that I sent it doesn't match. And so those are that's basically how those records exist. They are records that exist on your registrar for your website. So, or for your domain. And so if you go to your domain and there's a specific type of record that you can put into your website on your registrar so that people, or for your domain on your registrar, so that when people attempt to communicate to you, they look up those specific settings. So something like DMARC is looked up as a DMARC TXT record, SPF is TXT record, and so is DKM. Those are all TXT records. And so those can be seen to identify your organization's email settings so that people know if your shit's secure. So all that being said, the first thing that your vendor should tell you when you're setting up your email filtration service is it should tell you to edit those settings, your DMARC, SPF, and DKM records. It may not tell you how to implement DKM because honestly, your DKM settings are probably going to come from Microsoft or whoever your email provider is. And I guess I should have covered this at the top. While there are other email services for corporations out there, 99.9% of everybody is using or utilizing Microsoft's Exchange or Microsoft 365's product. And so I'm just going to cover the vast majority of everybody here. Plus, it's the easiest and has the most widespread access of any service out there. Anyway, whole point being, let's go back to the beginning. Your email filtration vendor when you first are setting this up should tell you to set up your SPF and DMARC records. Then after that, it should tell you need to set up an email connector in Microsoft 365. This email connector is telling Microsoft who is allowed to send and receive email as your organization. So basically what you're doing is when you're configuring this, you're telling Microsoft, hey, this server is going to come through and it should only come from these servers. And this email is legitimate. Like this is the legitimate email. And you're instructing Microsoft to trust that. So then what happens is when an email comes through, the SPF record, or there are also an MX records and all of that. Fuck, I forgot to cover all that. God damn it, there's too much of this. It's complicated. That's why. MX records are other records that go on your domain for your registrar to tell people where to send emails to. And so your MX records point to your filtration service. Your filtration service then points those emails to Microsoft, and then Microsoft sees those emails coming from your filter service, and because of your connector, knows that they're allowed to come through. So we've covered all this. There are other settings that you need to adjust in Microsoft that you don't necessarily know about, and that your vendor probably won't tell you about because, it's just extra work. But one of the things that you need to do on top of that is to set up skip listing or enhanced content filtration in Microsoft. And the way you do this is by going to Defender. Fuck, they've changed it 16 times since I've started this podcast episode. You go into Defender in Microsoft 365, and from Defender, you go to email and collaboration, and from there you go to threats and policies, or rules and policies, and then from there you go to threat policies, and then from there should be an enhanced content filtration option, which then you'll see your connector you've created, and then all you do is select that and tell it to basically skip this email filtration coming from this connector. And then what that will do, and you allow it for all users. And what that will do is it will tell Microsoft to ignore the security features for all emails coming in through Microsoft or coming in through your connector for security purposes. And what this does in effect is that if you are sending an email from Gmail, the email filtration service that you have selected may not, and probably does not identify that email filtration service as a valid sender of gmail.com. Their SPF record doesn't have their servers. So in order to get Microsoft to understand that the email didn't originate from your filter service just processed it, you have to tell it to ignore those servers and basically just view it as a pass-through. And so then Microsoft sees those IP addresses and settings from your filtration service, ignores them, and says, oh, okay, I know this came from Gmail, and I'm going to validate the sender of this email as if the filter wasn't in place. And so then the normal settings can go through. And so what this is going to do is it's going to allow your organization to basically audit emails, and it's going to allow Microsoft to view those emails and put their filter on it appropriately. Otherwise, it's just going to see that those SPF records fail and their entire fucking shit falls apart because you have to manually tell them about this fucking thing instead of them knowing that, hey, this connector means we trust this. It's not like a connector something that you would accidentally set up. Like it's not small work. So all that being said, that's one of the email configuration settings that you have to configure. And like Tom, your email filter is now handing the emails off to Microsoft so that Microsoft can just give it to the mailbox because that's their job. They put it in the mailbox. They should not be doing any additional filtering on that content because they shouldn't have to. That's Tom's job. So other things that need to be done from Microsoft's perspective. One of the things that you probably don't know if you're not deep into Microsoft or Office 365, or if you're just new to the whole IT thing, is that there's a thing called direct send. And what direct send is that you can identify if you are an organization that has Microsoft 365 in your MX records and your various auto discovers and other DNS records on your domain, you probably have Microsoft listed somewhere in there. And so when somebody goes sniffing around your domain, they can tell that you're using Microsoft 365. Well, if they know you're using Microsoft 365, all they have to do to send email to you is to know that you exist within Microsoft 365. And then all they have to do is send emails directly to your mailbox. And Microsoft will just accept this. And it doesn't matter who your email is coming from. It doesn't matter. They can pose as anybody. They can pose as you. They can pose as fucking Abraham Lincoln. Microsoft doesn't give a shit. They'll accept that email and start the process and forwarding it off to your mailbox because that's what Microsoft does. Direct send is important because it does have a bunch of other functions that are important within Microsoft. But Microsoft allows anybody to just skip any email filter and send directly to mailboxes within the tenant. And so because of this, an attacker, somebody who's maliciously trying to send you emails, can just send directly to mailboxes, skipping your filtration service, skipping any sort of identification and filtering on your system. And you might be thinking, hey, that's fucking bullshit. How can that be a thing? And first, I have to say, good on you, because, yeah, that is fucking bullshit. And second, I have to go, the second thing is, Microsoft, do you care to respond to any of that shit? Because you have the ability to stop this attack vector, yet you're doing nothing because you expect everybody to pay for it. You could just do this for free. Come on. I'm gesturing broadly here because Microsoft could just fucking do it, and they don't. Anyway, whole point of this is that this direct send is an attack vector that you can prevent. And in order to prevent it, you can do a lot of different things. But one of the things that you should do is you need to create a manual rule inside of Microsoft, a mail flow rule inside of Microsoft that identifies emails coming in as direct send as potentially malicious. And so what you basically want to do is you want to create a mail flow rule that says that if the SPF, DKIM, or DMARC records do not match on an email coming in from direct send, drop the email immediately. You can tell it to drop the email immediately, or you can send it off to a quarantine mailbox, but you should be creating a rule that states that. And you should specifically target emails coming from your own domain. So if you are, if your domain is iteedmyself.com, you want to block all emails that come from iteedmyself.com unless they pass their SPF, DMARC, and DKIM settings. And if they don't, then the email gets dropped immediately. You should absolutely set this up so that way you know that the emails coming from you have at least passed the very basic security settings check that should happen on all emails. Another thing you need to configure within Microsoft is a mailflow rule that identifies all external emails as being external. There's a way to do it so that all it does is show up as an external flag instead of it being interruptive or disruptive to the user by adding, subject lines or pending the message coming in. You can actually just have a flag pop up within Outlook or Outlook Web or whatever that tells you that it's an external email. And therefore, it just allows a marker that identifies, hey, beware, this is coming from outside your organization, even though you probably already know that because you probably don't talk to your coworkers all that often. You talk to your customers more often than you talk to your coworkers. Tom definitely does. So anyway, that's another one of the settings that you should implement on your tenant to make sure that your email filtration rules are being applied appropriately and that you're identifying external mail appropriately. These are just all to give you the chance to solve some of the problems that Microsoft could solve without spending the Microsoft money to do so. So all that being said, you should be looking to implement all of these. And again, a lot of this list, a lot of this stuff is stuff that you really should feel like it should be a no-brainer, no shit sort of implementation from Microsoft. But because of the way that email has to be handled, and I understand Microsoft doesn't want to have a heavy hand in security. They definitely don't want to block email. They definitely want to have the broadest access of email to an organization. However, the other side of the argument is that Microsoft has the capacity to literally shut down every email-based attack vector for free with no additional cost to them, and in fact, saving their customers a shit ton of money, worry, and aggravation by simply adjusting a few configuration settings on their end. They have the capacity, and they don't do it either out of laziness, carelessness, or because they're just that greedy. So I'm going to stop ranting about Microsoft's greed. Just move on. I'm just going to move on, guys. Move on. Fuck. Anyway, the whole point being, whole reason I wanted this specific episode out there was because it is an incredibly difficult task for email filtration to do its job properly, because there are a lot of different variables to email filtration. And I've covered this a lot in previous episodes, and it does warrant more conversation. It really does. Because not only do you have to deal with blocking emails appropriately, not only do you have to identify what's spam, what's phishing, what's malicious, what's not, you have to identify that in a way that allows users the ability to know when their emails aren't being delivered appropriately or aren't being received appropriately. And you need a methodology so that the user can, with confidence, know that their emails are valid, that the emails that they're receiving are safe, and that they can trust in their environment to do the right thing. Without any of that, then users become paranoid and they lose sight of what's actually going on, and they can become distracted, and it can create anxiety and angst within your environment. And really, it can make a user feel like security or IT is not doing their job. And so to avoid any of that, to avoid any of this anxiety, any of this trepidation, any of this angst, what we want to do is we want to pull all of that out and want to make sure that emails are always arriving appropriately, and that when and if an email gets blocked, a user has the ability to respond and approve on their own without having to deal with the bullshit of talking directly to the engineers. Because that's Tom's job, God damn it. Tom talks to the engineers because he has people skills. Damn it. Listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm telling you. I have people skills. Don't jump to conclusions. All of this leads into the conversation that as an organization, you have to receive emails into your environment. If you're a business that does anything that deals outside of your own organization, you probably have to have an email or two. You probably have to have people talking to other folks because that's how businesses survive. So make sure that you have the minimum level of email security. If you're just going to go Microsoft, cool, go straight Microsoft, but make sure you have somebody who is talented and understands the infrastructure of Microsoft and knows how to appropriately apply security settings and licenses so that you can get the biggest bang for your buck, because Microsoft certainly won't. Otherwise, if you're going to use a third-party email filtration service and you're going to basically augment Microsoft 365 with other features or functions, definitely make sure that when you do, you at least enable some minimum level of security and implementation. I've seen a lot of organizations who do not have email connectors set up from their filtration service to Microsoft 365. I've seen plenty of SPF records that never get created, MX records that are incorrect, auto-discover records that show up wrong. These are all things that need to be considered. And if you're having email delivery problems, specifically, you might want to look at a lot of these things. One of the things that I think I've covered in the past, but does have something to do with what we're talking about here, is that if your organization does send a lot of emails, meaning 5,000 emails, if it has ever sent more than 5,000 emails in a day, your organization is on a permanent list of bulk email senders. And so your emails that are sent outside of your organization are treated with a higher percentage of distrust than other domains. So the likelihood of your emails getting blocked is a lot greater. And so you must follow specific rules. You have to have an SPF record. You have to have a DKIM. You have to have a DMARC in order for your emails to be consistently delivered to their destinations at Gmail, Yahoo, Microsoft 365. So if you're one of those organizations that has sent bulk emails and you're finding that your emails are getting blocked, even the ones that aren't coming from your marketing department, that might be one of the reasons why your email configuration settings are wrong and you've been identified as a bulk sender. So make sure that you have somebody who can pay attention to all of this. Make sure that you have somebody who is an expert in this, who can help you through it, because otherwise you're kind of stabbing in the dark. Now, email sounds very difficult and complicated to set up, and trust me, if you're just getting into it, it can be, but once you understand it, once you grasp the concepts and fully understand how everything interacts, it becomes much easier to manage and a lot simpler to configure the right way. Because in the end, what we want Tom to look at, listen, and interact with the messages from the customers so that the engineers don't have to do that work. So the engineers can do their fucking job and not have to stop and deal with the bullshit of talking directly with a customer or getting in the way and maybe potentially ruining an entire account, because Microsoft just really sucks. And I think we can all agree with that. Anyways, guys, that's what I have for today. And I hope you all have a great day.